more of an overview of the features in general, or sort of this will be a refresher for a lot of you. Maybe some of you will see some things that you haven't seen before. But I'm going to try to spend some time in the program itself, showing a few things, using my layout as a model. And then towards the end, we'll talk about some of the differences between 4 and 5 and things.
I had the video pin along with that. This is what's going out. Go ahead, Mark.
We okay, Bob?
Yeah, I was trying to hide the video because I'm recording it.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and get into it. First of all, what is JMRI? You should think of it as a toolbox more than a program. It's really a collection of different things that you can connect together and use to either, you can use what's there to directly do things with your layout, but you can also use it as a platform to build your own stuff on top of that. Several people have done that. And at some point a little later on, I want to show you a few of those that add particular kinds of features that may be of interest. So it's several independent and separate tools all together in a package. And so you can use parts of it and not use other parts. And I'll get into what the parts are in a minute. And once you kind of get into it, you can dip your toe in and do one thing and then add something else and add something else and then change it back. You don't have to go in whole hog. There's a lot of stuff in here, but you can grow over time, or you can just use the pieces you're interested in. So it can be, if you look at the whole package, it can be a little overwhelming, but don't feel like you have to do everything all, in order to get any value out of it. It's not designed that way. It's meant to be used like a garage full of tools. If all you need is a screwdriver, then pick up the screwdriver and leave the rest of them on the shelf. It's got several major components that we'll talk about. Decoder Pro is probably the most famous module that allows you to program your DCC decoders. It also allows you to store your settings in a roster of locomotives so that you can manage your whole fleet. And let's say you can save the settings from a decoder onto your computer. So let's say a decoder gets fried and you need to replace it. You can buy a new one of the same model, plug it into the locomotive, and program it with those same settings that you had stored, and you're back to normal. Or if you have several locomotives of the same type that you want to operate the same way, you can program one of them and then copy all those settings to the rest of them very simply. Allows you to do some things like that. And like I said, you can also kind of use it as a locomotive roster or inventory program as well. Next up is Panel Pro. Panel Pro allows you to build layout control panels, and you can do that at pretty much any level of sophistication you need. And so you can have, just little lighting panels, you can have track diagrams, you can have the switchboards, prototypical looking track switchboards and things like that, and remotely control your layout that way, or directly. You can even have it drive displays. If you have a fairly large layout, you could use like old iPads or something and have multiple displays in various places to allow you to control turnouts and switches and lighting signals, whatever you like. Some of the less famous, I'll say, I think these are quite popular amongst the people that use them, but they're maybe lesser known. Operations Pro, Larry's the guy to talk to about this. I think he uses it quite extensively. This allows you to do railroad operations, so you can track cars, build trains, manifests, and move the freight and passengers along the railroad in a fairly realistic, prototypical fashion. So if you're into the operations and the paperwork and such, this is your module. Dispatcher Pro is one area that is interesting to me, but I haven't personally been able to delve into very much. But it is related to directly dispatching and controlling trains on the layout, and in particular, automation of those trains. So you can have, if you want to do a layout where you've got, the 2 o'clock commuter train running every time, you can just schedule that and the computer will run it for you while you're busy switching stuff in the yard or running, the peddler freight or whatever you want to do. And then there's Sound Pro, which is intended to be used for ambient type sounds, or sound animations. So if you want to have sound effects for your grade crossing signals, or if you want to trigger a sound effect for say a welder or a campfire, or some weather effects or birds or things like that, this module will allow you to control those and have those sounds either scheduled or triggered off of actions on the layout and things like that. It's another area I haven't personally played with, but it's there. And then there's also, I didn't put it on here, but there's the virtual sound decoder, which is separate from Sound Pro. It's a module that I helped create that allows your computer to play the role of the sound portion of a sound decoder in a locomotive that's running on the layout. And so instead of having the little speaker literally inside the locomotive, you can have the locomotive sounds played through your computer sound system, and it will follow whatever commands you're giving the locomotive from your throttle. That's been there's another guy who's been carrying the torch on working on that for quite some time. I haven't been able to work on it much, but it's still sort of in the prototype phase. It's not really, I wouldn't consider it fully baked yet as a feature. There's some challenges in terms of finding sound effects and things to use with it. Hardware support. So you could run this on just about anything. Specifically, it'll run on all the major Windows versions. It'll run on Mac OS X or Mac OS, and also run on Linux. So my list of things is a little bit dated. I've got it running on. I'm running the latest version of the Mac OS Mojave, I think, or Catalina. Anyway, whatever the current one is, I'm running it, and it's working just fine with that. It'll also work on Windows 11. And there's always, all of the older versions are available if you're running something that can't support the current version. I mentioned there that it needs Java 1.8. That's one of the differences I'll talk about later, is which Java versions are required. As far as the layout hardware systems, I think you'd be hard pressed to find something that it can't interface with. The list is quite extensive, and I'll give you a look at that in a minute. I'm trying not to switch back and forth between screens too much. Certainly anything DCC, they've been very on the leading edge of LCC development. And they also cover some of these other things like CMRI and rail driver and things like that. And they're also there's a lot of the developers' interest in things like RFID tracking, various location systems, and other technology that is experimental, and maybe of interest to people who really like to tinker. And I have a link there in the slide deck to the hardware page. Let me just pop right over there and show that. Figure out how. Chrome. Haha. All right, so this is the JMRI webpage, and very easily at jmri.org. And I was just going to show real quickly this over here on the left is just the list of supported hardware systems that they support. And I just want to kind of give you an idea how extensive that list is. Like I said, you'd have a hard time finding a system that is not supported as far as whatever you're using. So next I wanted to talk about Decoder Pro. And so I'm just going to pop up my own Decoder Pro page. So this is still sharing, right? Yeah, okay. This is my roster. Oh, that didn't do what I wanted to. Apologies, folks. Here we go. Okay, this is the Decoder Pro main page. And this is where you can see your list of locomotives. They can be sorted into groups. For instance, I have, these are locomotives that other people own that I've worked on. And so I have their, see, that's other owners. I've got their stuff stored in here in case I need it at some point in the future. These are my personally owned locomotives. This is the entire list, so on. So you can group these together however you want to. Each locomotive has got an ID, which is a name that you can make up. I'm tending to use it as usually has somebody's name or whatever I need, the type of locomotive it is. Got the DCC address, the type of decoder that's installed, information about the in-world model. There's a Southern Pacific 6442. Then you got, I guess, real-world information, the manufacturer, model, who owns it, last time it was modified, so on. Usually inventory stuff. Each individual locomotive will have an entry down here, and you can include a photograph of each one. I don't have any, but that's what would show up in this white box over here on the left. So let's say we want to create a new locomotive. Just click the new locomotive button. Let's say it's got a Digitrax Series 6. Let's just pick one. There's, again, this is just the Digitrax list from DS54 up. There's quite a few in there, pretty much everything. So I can give it an address, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And then I can open the programmer, and it will allow me to access in a fairly easy to use format. And this basic format is the same for every decoder, but the individual items on each tab will be customized, automatically customized to the brand and model of decoder that you're working on. So you've got a roster entry page where you got some useful information to keep track of, the road name, model, comments, if you have something you want to mention in there. Then you've got your basic settings, the address and the speed step settings, direction of travel. You customize the motor operation. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We can do something in detail some other time. Your basic speed control settings, your start, mid, max. If you want to mess with the whole speed table, you can do that. It's even got some presets like, you know, a straight line. You can do a constant ratio curve or logarithmic curve, that kind of thing. The functions can be mapped. You have control of the lighting, depending on, again, on the specific decoder, analog controls, consist settings, any advanced stuff. This doesn't happen to be a sound decoder, but that I picked. But if it does, then you have settings here for sound. And then you can also, if you really want to, you can go in and individually directly program individual CVs with all the function you have available in the other tags. I'm not sure why you'd want to, but you can. And then if there's anything manufacturer specific, it'll be on the manufacturer tab. And again, that just depends on the specific model.
Hey, Mark, this
yes.
is Bruce DeMayer. Roger Merritt has identified the fact, and I was confused what you were doing. We're still seeing your first page. We're still seeing all.
Oh, sorry, that's the screen sharing thing. I'm doing it wrong. Here, let me screen share my whole desktop. That should fix it.
Okay.
Is that better? Can you see I should be moving the programming page around.
Okay, yes, that's great.
Okay,
Thanks.
I apologize. I was doing the screen sharing wrong. Let me back up then. Sorry, this does require some visual aids. How far did we get? Did we see the Decoder Pro homepage? Or have we been looking at the JMRI or the slide deck the whole time? No, okay.
Yeah, I'm back unmuted. That's the page that was showing when you first started, and I think has been up for most of the time you've been talking.
Okay. So we talked about, here's the list. We've got the roster groups and individual locomotive information down here and so on. So let's say I want to create a new one. I can click on new loco. Hopefully now you can see the list. Say it's a Digitrax. There's quite a few options there. Let's pick a sound decoder this time. The STM144, just for example, and give it a 4-byte address, and we'll open the programmer. So now we should be looking at the big programmer screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you have a series of tabs across the top that categorize all the stuff you can modify in the decoder. I'll go through them pretty quickly. This is the roster entry page. So this is, you know, your accounting information, if you will, you know, road name and number, the DCC address, any comments you want to store, that kind of thing. Basic tab is your basic required stuff for everything, your locomotive address, direction of travel, speed format, things like that. The motor tab, basic speed control and speed tables allow you to set the motor settings depending on what level of detail you want to get into that. Function map will allow you to map functions depending on how the decoder works. But so if you have to move something to a different, say connect a light to a different pad or something, you can change that in here and program it. Lighting settings, analog mode, consist settings, anything advanced that happens to come with that brand of decoder. With Digitrax, the transponding is the only thing that shows up here. And then If you have sound options, you can choose. This particular one's got 2 different locomotives, several different horns to choose from, different notching modes, so on. Obviously, different decoders are going to have considerably more or less function there. If you want to directly work on CVs, that's the CV tab, and you can figure out numbers to your heart's content. I personally try not to if I don't have to, but it's there if you need it. Anything brand specific to Digitrax or the other brands that you're using will be on the brand specific tab, and then again, kind of brand specific Digitrax stuff will be here. When you make a change, you can either write just those changes, or you can rewrite the entire decoder if you want to. You have several different options for that. But it just provides, instead of having to deal with the punching things directly in on your throttle and making conversions to CVs, it gives you this very nice tab-based English language ability to program exactly what you want. And really, that's kind of the basics of Decoder Pro. It's, in a way, it's pretty simple. I mean, it just gives you a way to keep track of your locomotives and program them in a way that's much easier than trying to use your throttle or whatever.
Mark, would you give a quick rundown on what you should do to place the engine on a test track versus the layout, and how long should that test track typically be? Just sort of a bench thing to put the engine on while you're
Sure.
finishing this part of the project.
Sure. So part of what I'll say is a little bit Digitrax specific, but the other systems are pretty similar because it's the same basic problem you're solving. The classic way to do this is your command station will have both your main layout track outputs, and they'll have a test track output. Usual way to do this is take a short section of straight track and connect it to the that's not connected at all to your layout, and connect that to the test track outputs. And that section of track should be, the locomotive is going to move a little bit when it gets programmed. So you want it a little bit longer. I'd say maybe twice as long as your longest locomotive would be a rule of thumb, good number for as far as the length of it. I guess it doesn't even have to be straight. If you really want to use a curved piece, that'd be fine. But so the idea there, just give a little bit of room to set the locomotive on, and then have that separately plugged into your test track. And then down here on the, let's say we're doing BNO number 4 here, down here in the lower right corner of the Decoder Pro screen, you can see you can choose on the programming track or programming on the main. And the edit only entry is if you just want to change, like say the roster information or something. You don't actually want to program the locomotive. You just want to edit the entry in your roster. So you choose program on the programming track, and you'd hit the program button. It'll open this stuff up. You'd make your changes. Let's say we want to tweak the speed table, give it a logarithmic curve. You can individually move these sliders if you want, but there's presets down here.
Mark, there was a point on my old layout after we set the thing up originally that I had trouble with the inconsistency of the test track, and we found out that I was using too small a wire. I was using telephone wire to bring it to the test track. That has to be a pretty good hunk of copper to make sure that the control box is actually doing things on the decoder.
Yes, it does. You want to make sure it's I mean, you kind of can't use too big a wire unless it's just unwieldy. Telephone wire is definitely not the size you want to use. Probably something like at least 16 gauge. 18 is probably fine as long as the wire is short. It's a short run from the command station to the track, but especially if you're programming sound stuff, where there's a lot of stuff being passed back and forth, just having a bigger wire there helps with the signal flow and the power flow that it needs. Every time it programs one of those CVs, it's going to bump the motor a little bit. So you are actually running the locomotive a little bit when you do that. So yeah, Bruce, you're right. You need to have a decent sized wire. I mean, it doesn't have to be 12 or 14 gauge, but I would say probably no smaller than 18. But you are only running maybe 2 feet or less of track. So you, like I said, you don't have to go crazy with the size of it, but don't skimp on that programming tracker. You will have problems. There's a few other little issues you can run into sometimes with specific locomotives and specific programming stations. There's an old trick where sometimes you have to put a resistor across the rails of the track in order to, you have 2 problems. You've got the locomotive has to be able to see the command coming from the station, and then the command station's got to be able to see the current flow of the motor bumping in response to know that the decoder received the command and did the right thing with it. And occasionally there are things you have to do to make that work, to make sure there's enough current flow back to the command station. I don't want to get too deep into that because it's a little bit situation specific, and most of the time it's not too big of a problem, but it's common enough that if you do run into issues, don't hesitate to reach out either to me or Bruce knows a good bit about this. John probably forgotten more than the rest of us about this. Forgotten more than we know, i.e. he's the real expert here. Or any of the online forums around your specific brand of DCC system or JMRI. A lot of the little tricksy issues you run into there are well known, and there's well known solutions. So if you start bumping into something and you can't figure out what's going on, don't hesitate to reach out, because it's probably something somebody else has already figured out, and it's an easy fix if you know what the fix is, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel trying to solve the problem. Yeah, good question, Bruce, or comment. So I've made a change here, and I can either, I'm not actually going to click this because I'm not actually connected to my layout. I don't actually want to reprogram the locomotive, but you would click either write changes on the sheet, which would write only the change. So for example, let's say this was the curve that was already in there, and I just wanted to do that to it, but I only wanted to reprogram. Good Lord, I'm already 30 minutes into this. I'd hit write changes. If I just want to write the entire speed table, I'd hit write full sheet, or I could hit write all sheets and write the entire decoder, which probably isn't something I want to do other than like the first time. Also, if you're dealing with a new decoder, you could do a read and get all of the data off of it in 1 or 2 quick clicks here. So you can use the you can do the programming on the main. Yes, close the window. I don't want to do this. Or the programming check. Now, programming on the main is a little bit tricky because you got to make sure that you are not blasting programming. Don't change a locomotive's address with programming on the main, because you'll change all of them. There's a few other careful things like that. But if you want to change, pick a different horn from the sound selections, you can use programming on the main. You don't have to bother with getting it onto a separate test track. Having said that, unless I've got a good reason to, I usually just move to a test track and make sure that I avoid any chance of having a problem where I program the wrong locomotive. Okay, if we can move on. I'm trying to not overdo time. So Panel Pro, like I said, you can build all kinds of different panels, CTC. You can directly control from the panel pretty much anything on your layout, design them the way you want. And one nice thing about it is with some of the underlying logic stuff that's in the JMRI, you can program stuff that's being controlled by multiple systems from multiple different brands. So if you've got DCC turnout control, and you've got LocoNet detection, and you've got LCC running your accessories and whatever, Panel Pro can make all of that. You don't have to worry about which system's controlling which device. You can just build a panel, and all your switches and all your buttons and everything that you need, they all work the same for you as one integrated thing. So I'll show you an example of that. This is my layout. This is a track diagram that I have put together. Now, since I'm not hooked up to the layout, it's not going to show. Each one of these X's is a signal that is showing which way the turnout, which way they're the track signals. And I can click on the individual turnouts, and you see this one here that I'm clicking on, it will show the position. Were I connected to the layout, they all would have automatically set to the current physical position of the track or not. Uh-oh. What I do? Sorry, folks. I'm having a audio problem. Are we there? Can you hear me?
Very, very bad in the background, Mark.
Okay. I don't know. I'm trying to fix it. Microphone, speaker. Okay. Well,
Mark, there you go. Hit sound, full sound on that.
apologies, folks.
Yeah, Mark, we've lost your sound.
Mark, go back two things.
My
I don't know what they call it, but it's up in.
AirPods died.
Mark, can you hear me?
Is that any better?
Mark, this is Bruce. Can you hear me?
Oh, goodness.
Nope.
No, I'm not doing that.
Well, it looks like he's trying to find something.
Okay, somebody say
Mark?
something. Yes.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear
I can
us?
hear
There, Mark.
Now you got you.
We're here. You're
You can
fine.
hear me now? Okay. Okay. Apologies, my AirPods died. Right in the middle of this. Okay, so this is the track layout. And again, as I said, if I click on one of these turnouts, it'll actually throw the turnout on the layout. These red X's would be signals, which would respond to either the switch positions or to routes that I have selected during operations. The little red dots up here in the staging tracks are examples of track occupancy sensors, and they would show either red if it's occupied,
These go yellow because they're a yard track, so they'll show a cautionary if the track is open, and it should show gray if there's no information. So that's an example of a layout panel, as they're called. It shows, generally meant to show the actual track, physical track location. Let's see, where are the rest of my screens? The window should be showing up, they're not. So this is a little one, a completely different type of panel. This is the I have a PM42 power board that breaks my power to my layout into 4 subsections, and this little panel monitors that and shows me if one of the subsections has a short, and the PM42 reports it, it'll show here. So if everything's fine, it'll be green. If it's short, it'll be red. And that way I can tell from the screen here, if I have a locomotive derail or something and it shorts the track, I can tell which area it's in. So you could do little things like that. It's sort of an auxiliary panel. And then this is where I'm going to pop over and show you some of these cool things you can do. This is a fairly famous one. This has been one of the examples on JMRI for as long as I can remember. This is the Quaker Valley Railroad. And this is a CTC panel that they built, complete with occupancy sensing in the 2 sections and the old style CTC switches. So that's like an example of a more nicer looking, if you will, layout that can be done. There are people who actually built, this guy actually built an actual physical CTC switch panel, and all of these are actually controlled under the covers by JMRI on a computer. But instead of using a display screen with buttons, you've got actual physical switches and lights on this panel to control the layout. That's kind of one of the coolest things that I've seen. This group here also did it. Notice they did this on version 2 of JMRI. So here's an example of a little auxiliary panel that is also being controlled. And so the switches are being input into JMRI, and the lights are being controlled by JMRI. This one's a little bit more like what I was shooting for, sort of a modern track diagram style panel. There's one, some nice colors. And then you've got some folks that have built entire programs on top of JMRI to do different things. I would really suggest you, this is the, from the homepage, this is the cool uses tab over here on the left. Go dig through that, and you'll find some really cool stuff. I don't want to dive too far down into Dispatcher Pro and Operations Pro, although I want to show you one thing about the Dispatcher Pro. So what it'll allow you to do is, if you have your layout, you can designate these different sections or blocks, if you will. That JMRI uses the term block in a very specific way, that sections of track that can be allocated to a train as they go forward. And this is how it automates the whole trains sharing a single track and passing each other at passing sidings and stopping at stations kind of thing. You can divide your layup out, define all these different sections, and then as the train moves along, again, under automated control, you, the dispatcher, can, it's coming through this section 1 here, you can allocate section 3, and it will stop when it gets to the end of section 3. Then after the other train goes by, you can tell it section 4 is clear. And you can either have an actual dispatcher, doing that just like a real one would, or you can actually automate it so that when the computer sees that section 4 is clear, it'll automate that dispatching too. Again, this is an area I haven't personally gotten into, so I don't know it very well, but some of the things I've seen, you could do some pretty cool stuff with automation with this, and sort of higher level dispatching operations. So just wanted to show that really quick. So we got Operations Pro again. Larry does this a lot. This is really fun. You can this allows you to do the paperwork for the railroad and build trains and move specific cars with specific commodities in them, and have your operators move those trains and pick up cars, drop off cars, and everything according to your schedule. Dispatcher Pro and Sound Pro, again, as I mentioned. There's some other things. There's Logix, which kind of adds a layer of intelligence in between the hardware and your higher level things like Panel Pro. So this is where you can start combining things like if there's a train in this specific location and someone has thrown a switch a certain way, and then you could have to, it will maybe change the signal to a certain state or something like that. Gives you a layer of that. If this and that or the other thing, then do something else. The signaling system is pretty robust, and I find it pretty interesting. They've got a lot of different actual prototypical signal systems modeled. So if you want to run the Union Pacific in the 1950s, they've probably got the signaling system in there for it. And they've also got some simpler systems if you want to just do something that is easier to understand and doesn't necessarily follow a specific prototype, but is realistic. And you don't want to put a lot of effort into it. You can very quickly get something realistic running without a lot of work. Then the routes are part of the Dispatcher Pro system, where you can set up where the trains are supposed to go and how they're supposed to get from point A to point B. There's fast clocks and speedometers built in, so it can run your fast clock for you and display it on a panel, and it can also measure the speed of the train as it goes by a certain point. That's pretty easy to implement. Remote stuff. It has its own web server, so you can actually have your dispatcher be in another state, accessing the panels through a web browser. There's multiple different ways of doing that. Even your locomotive engineers can be running web-based throttles. You can have multiple instances of JMRI running multiple sections of the layout, and on a really large layout, and they can talk to each other. And then there's the Y-throttle server, which allows you to use your smartphone. I think we're going to do a clinic on that later in the fall, specifically how to do that. But it'll allow your smartphone, either iPhone or Android, to act as a throttle and control your trains. So we'll get into that in the fall. So here's where I'm going to talk briefly about the difference between 4 and 5, version 4 and version 5. Version 5, the big change that caused the big number change is they started requiring Java version 11 or 1.11. And so you'll have to make sure that you are able to run that on your computer, and pretty much any reasonably new computer should be able to do that. There are instructions for updating Java on your computer on the JMRI website. But the Java version, Java is the language that JMRI is written in, and it requires some support software on your computer. There's instructions on the JMRI page on how to get that and install it or update it if you need to. But that is the one thing where you may run into if you're trying to run this on an older computer. The older that your computer is, the more of an issue this may be. You may find that you can't run version 5 because you can't update to Java 11. The previous version was requirement was Java 8, which was JMRI 4. But the nice thing is, as I mentioned back at the beginning, is they have every version of JMRI that's ever been put out still available. And so if you are trying to use a really old computer and you can't update Java, you can find a version that will still work. It just may be missing, some bells and whistles and features and bug fixes and things.
Mark, would you recommend the issue of using a computer for more things than just JMRI, or would you suggest the best thing would be to take an older computer that you maybe replace with something and use it as dedicated to JMRI?
I'm kind of ambivalent about that. I think it depends on the situation. Certainly it's very convenient if a lot of people have, their previous computer laying around, or they can get their hands on an old laptop. It's nice to have a computer just dedicated to your layout that's plugged in and you can just walk downstairs and start using it. I personally, you might be surprised, I really only have one computer, my laptop. And so I have JMRI on my laptop and I have my my desk in the layout room set up so that I can plop it down, plug it in and fire it up. So I use that. Okay, so I sort of fibbed. I also have a Raspberry Pi hooked up to the layout, but that's more for experimenting with Raspberry Pi at this point. If you have an older computer, there's the convenience of just being able to set it up and leave it there and that be all it does. But there's certainly nothing wrong with, especially if you are the sort to use a laptop, using your laptop and plug it into the layout when you want to mess with the layout. Now, if you're sharing that laptop with your spouse or kids or whatever, then it's issues like that you're going to run into. Is your family computer in the kitchen? Do you have to share your laptop with somebody else? Do you care whether you're lugging it up and down the stairs or into the shed or wherever your layout room is? That's going to be the thing that determines the answer to that question. Technically speaking, unless you're talking about a really old computer, say more than 5 or 10 years old, I don't think there's really a technical thing that's going to decide that. It's going to be what your convenience is and what suits your life.
Okay, thanks.
Bob?
Yeah, Mark, could you kind of cut it down? We're kind of running along.
Sure. Yeah, I'm trying to wrap it up actually. Okay. You said I had lots of time. So that was basically it. I did run, as usual, a little longer than I intended. But if we've got time for a short round of a couple of questions, or certainly if we don't, then by all means, my email is available. Folks have my phone. If you don't have it, you can get it from Bob or Larry, or contact me over email. I'm always happy to do what I can to talk things through or come help you solve a problem or whatever. There's, we could delve into this for days, but we don't have days. So I'll
Well,
stop.
thank you very much, Mark. Very good in telling us about, especially what all JMRI can do and